Today I'm going to be showing you everything you need to know before buying a Honda Grom. My first Grom I purchased brand new from the dealership in 2016, which I still have today. It's the bike you see most on this channel. I've also purchased a used 2015 Honda Grom, made it a lot faster, had some fun with it, then sold it. In the summer of 2018, Honda sponsored me with a brand new 2018 Honda Grom, which I picked up in San Francisco, rode it across the United States back to my home in Florida. I then stripped it down, built it back up to be a stunt Grom, and recently gave it away to one of my supporters. Congratulations, just won yourself a Honda Grom! And today, I bought my fourth Grom, a used 2017. So since I think I have a good amount of knowledge on these bikes, I decided to put together an ultimate buyer's guide for purchasing your first Honda Grom. So here it is. If you're new here, my name is Photogromer, and if you're watching this video, I assume you're into Groms, so feel free to hit that subscribe button since this channel has all things related to Honda Groms. From build series to group rides and everything in between, you're going to be entertained for a while if you like Groms. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump into this guide. We're going to be focusing specifically on buying a used Grom from a private seller, as that's going to be the best bang for your buck. However, I'm going to briefly talk about buying new from the dealership and the pros and cons with each. By far the best place to find Groms for sale is the Facebook Marketplace and Facebook local Grom groups. If you don't have Facebook, I recommend making a throwaway account for the sole purpose of finding yourself a Grom through the Marketplace. And also, local Grom groups usually reside on Facebook, so if you want to find a local group ride, chances are you're going to have a Facebook account to find it. So before we go into the budget, let's go ahead and do a breakdown on the different types of Honda Groms if you're new to them. There are two different generations, the OG and the SF. The OG being the 2014-2015 year, and the SF being 2017 and up to 2020. At the time of this video, 2021 hasn't been announced, so that could all change. Now the difference between the OG and the SF is mostly plastics and the headlight. The motor is going to be completely the same, as well as pretty much everything else on the bike, with the exception of some little differences here and there. With that being said, there's no real difference between the SF and the OG Grom as far as how it rides. They're going to feel identical. Naturally, the OG Grom has been out there a little bit longer, so chances of finding the mint one decreases as time goes on, but they're still out there. You just have to be a little patient and search a little harder. The only thing that changed in the SF Grom from 2017 to 2020 is the color options of the fairings. Everything else is identical swap throughout the years. So if you find a red 2017 Honda Grom and it's a great deal, but you really wanted blue plastics, rest assured, they're only about $200 brand new from Partzilla, so don't get too hung up on the color of the plastics. They're a very easy and inexpensive way to change your plastics, not like a big bike where it's going to be $1,000. So let's go ahead and talk about the budget now. I'm going to break down this video into 3 different budgets. This is what you will pay the seller, not necessarily what it's listed for. So on the low end is going to be between $1,500 and $2,000. The fair, I consider $2,000 to $2,500, and then the high end will be $2,500 to $3,000. So $1,500 to $2,000. At the low end of this budget, you're going to find yourself an OG Grom with higher miles or a more clapped out stunner bike. It might have been kept outside, have broken plastics, have a bent subframe, just an all-around beater. So that'd be closer to like $1,800 range. Usually any Grom listed for $1,500 will sell within hours. Here's an example of a rough SF Grom. It's my friend Lewis's. If you've been here on the channel, he's constantly in it. But you can see it's in rough condition. It's kept outside, the fairings have fallen off, loud noises come from the motor. It's pretty rough. I personally would be hesitant to pay $1,500 for this, but if you want to get into the Grom scene and you want to get into it cheap, this is what most of them are going to look like for around $1,500, and they still may sell pretty quickly. Most OG Groms will sell around the $1,800 range with nothing wrong with them besides a lot of miles, maybe like 10,000 miles, maybe some scrapes from dropping it, but pretty decent condition. At closer to the $2,000 range, you'll find an OG Grom that maybe has fewer miles, like under 5,000, maybe has some decent aftermarket parts, or it's pretty near stock. Again, this is going to be what you pay for it, not what it's listed for. If I see an ad for $2,400 for a Grom mentioned above, I see it selling at about $2,000. We'll talk more about negotiations in a bit, but just keep in mind, as I throw out these numbers, we're talking about what you should have the cash in your pocket to make the deal. Let me pause right there and talk about the Unicorn, which I'll reference in this video often. The Unicorn is a Grom being sold for well under the value. For example, an OG or an SF Grom with 5,000 miles at stock, no abuse, etc. selling for $1,500. That's an exception. Those deals don't come up often, but when they do, they rarely last for more than a couple hours. For this video, I'm going to be sticking with mostly the fair price to pay for those different types of Groms and budgets. But if you're patient and you're quick, you can scoop up a Unicorn if you spend all day refreshing the classified ads. And that's something I did with my fourth Grom, which I'll show you here in a bit. All right, let's move on to the fair price range, the $2,000 to $2,500. Around this price range, you'll find most OG Groms listed unless they're out of their mind or have a lot of money into their Grom and aftermarket parts. Let's pause there. I highly recommend finding a Grom as close to stock as possible. Usually you can get the best deals on them, and there's a little extra confidence that the previous owner didn't abuse it or jack something up. And let's talk about mods real quick. Just because they spent $1,000 on mods doesn't mean it transfers to an extra $1,000 worth in the value of the Grom. So you're not going to get a $2,500 Grom with $1,000 parts and just automatically assume it's a $3,500 Grom. It doesn't work that way. Use the rule of about 50 to 60% on the aftermarket parts, what you could sell them for if they're in like new condition. With that being said, there are some good aftermarket parts and some not so good ones. We'll talk about that in a bit, but just keep that in mind. As close to stock as possible is what I look for when I'm looking for a used Honda Grom. Paying closer to the $2,000 range, you'll find the OG Groms that should be in pretty decent condition. If they're stock, they should have lower miles, like under 4,000 seems to be the sweet spot for this price. Towards the higher price, like the $2,500 range, you'll find some SF Groms with similar mileage and condition. $2,400, $2,500 is a pretty fair price for a Grom if it's in excellent condition, lower miles, and no mechanical issues. Usually SF Groms are listed about $2,800, but $2,500 is pretty easy to obtain with cash and a motivated seller. Now this range is kind of tricky. You'll have the wildest conditions of Groms, from clappers being listed for too much to newer Groms with lower miles in new condition. I recommend buying a Grom within this range. Plan on spending upwards of $2,000 to $2,500 and you should have some buying power when it comes to finding a used Honda Grom. And finally we have the high price, the $2,500 to $3,000 range. Again, this is what you would pay. This is for an SF Grom, a newer Grom, maybe a 2020, 2019 with tasteful mods or basically in showroom condition, and you're itching to get a Grom today. If you have this budget to spend, you're going to have your pick of different Groms for sale in your area. I personally wouldn't spend $3,000 for a stock Grom. However, if it has aftermarket parts that you can sell and easily make $500 and you're left with like a brand new Grom for $2,500, then it might be worth it. We'll talk more about this as it relates to my recent Grom purchase. So supply demand is going to be the big thing. So I live in Florida where we can ride 365 days a year. So our market's pretty steady throughout the year. Maybe a little bit crazier during tax time, but it's pretty steady throughout the year. If you live in Wisconsin and it's the beginning of winter, you're probably going to get better deals than in the middle of summer. So just keep that in mind. When I give you these prices, it's going to be based on my experience and what I found to be the normal price within the normal type of supply demand. So a valid question I get is, why would you pay that much for a used Grom when you can get a brand new Grom for about the same price? So let's talk about dealer fees. If you've never been to a dealership or bought anything new or used from a dealership, they got this little thing called fees. So I'm not going to address tax and tag because you're still going to have to pay that regardless if it's new or used, but dealer fees are important to take into consideration, and they're the reason you'll see Groms listed for $4,000 used. Let's talk about MSRP. So the 2020 Grom, the MSRP is $3,400, so that doesn't include those dealer fees. Let's break down my original Grom purchase when I purchased it new, my 2017 Grom. The MSRP was $200 cheaper at $3,200. I paid $37.48 out the door. If we take tax and tag off that, $34.61 is what I paid. They took off an additional $300 in rebates, which brought it down to $3,161. So that $3,161 is the cost of the Grom. So as you can see, I'm a little bit higher than the highest point of the high budget for buying a used one. So let's take that same math and roll it into today's MSRP. So if you buy new and get the same deal I got, which I shopped all the dealers in a 300-mile radius for a couple months, you're going to be paying roughly $3,300 for a new 2020. In my opinion, you should always buy used when it comes to the Grom, and you shouldn't pay more than $2,500 when getting a used Grom because you can get it in the same condition. If you pay $3,700 and decide you want to sell it a month later, you're not going to get $3,700. You're not even going to get $3,000 for it. You'll probably get $2,700 if you're lucky. So why overpay by $1,000 when you can get the same bike and spend that extra money on mods? So what about the warranty? So if you buy new, you're going to get a warranty, right? So it's pointless. These motors and these bikes are not some super complicated machine. They're literally a lawnmower with wheels. Anything you're going to do to damage the bike will be on your own doing, like burning out the clutch, not covered by the warranty. Starving the motor of oil by doing wheelies, not covered by the warranty. Breaking the frame, not covered by warranty. Everything I've seen go wrong with these bikes has not been covered by warranty because they don't break unless you break them. And when you break them, the warranty is not covered. The replacement parts and the ease to work on these is far too cheap to justify spending an extra $1,000 on a warranty you'll never use. So again, don't get hung up on a warranty or a service plan. It takes literally 13 seconds to change your oil. It takes a quart of oil. Put it out of your mind unless you like throwing money away. These are by far the easiest things to work on. All right, so all that out of the way, you're ready to shop, right? You got a budget in mind? Make sure you have cash in hand ready to go when you're ready to start shopping online.
You don't want to show up with a stack like this because then you're going to be spending the majority of your time there watching this guy count $2,500 in 20. So what I'm doing is I'm stopping by the bank and I'm going to trade it in for some hundreds That way it should be pretty easy, pretty quick to count.
If a great deal comes up, you're going to need to get there first. I've seen Groms get posted and sell within the same hour. All right, so let's move on to initial search online. So you find a Grom that you think will be within your budget. It looks good from the pictures. The first thing I do, especially if it's on Facebook, is I Facebook stalk the seller. I want to learn more about the seller. Are there pictures of him doing wheelies? Does it look like it's his first motorcycle? Or is he a retiree that just wanted a toy for the RV park? Does he keep it outside? Does it look like he has disposable income and wouldn't skip an oil change? Or is he struggling to put gas in his Grom? A lot of times you can visit the seller's profile and find more information outside what they list in the ad. These are just factors to consider, not necessarily a deal breaker, but knowledge is power when buying a used motorcycle. So let's say everything looks good at first glance. Let's get in contact with that seller now. The first thing I do after messaging him and making sure it's still available is, do you have a clean paper title in hand? That'll help avoid a lot of wasted time if the seller still has a lien on it, meaning the bank owns it and he's still paying for it. I strongly recommend not buying a Grom with a bill of sale on an agreement that the seller will take your money and pay off the loan, then send you the title. It can get messy really quick. If the title isn't in his hand, I don't move forward regardless of how good of a deal it may be. It's just not worth my time to try to chase it down. All right, let's move on. Let's pretend the title's in hand. There's no liens on it. Let's move forward. I ask him why he's selling it. This might provide helpful information. Maybe he wants a bigger bike. Maybe he needs cash for personal reasons. That's good to know if you're going to negotiate. Maybe he never rode it and just bought it as a toy. Also good to know. Asking isn't a big deal, but it's a nice icebreaker. Gives you a little insight on the seller's motivation to sell and maybe get it for a little less than he's asking. If he says he's in no hurry to sell, he's just putting it out there for a feeler, you might have an uphill battle trying to get him down a little bit on the price. I then ask if there's any damage or issues like the engine's knocking, it's ticking, the clutch is slipping, bent levers, broken plastics. Has the bike ever been down, basically? Let him decide if he wants to volunteer that information before you show up. It also sets a mood of how much money you can talk him down, and he may point something out that you might overlook when you get there. However, it's going to be up to you to walk around when you get there. Remember, all sellers are liars, but this question gives them an opportunity to say the frame is bent or the motor ticks a little bit, so you can ask for a video before you actually drive out there, especially if it's a couple hours away. You don't want to get all the way out there, find out the frame's bent. However, you need to trust your gut. So look at the pictures. If there's no indications that something's amiss, don't press the point too hard, especially if it's a good deal. Show up with cash and take a closer look. Chances are you're not the only one messaging the seller right now, and he might ignore your lengthy questions for another buyer. Another question I get a lot is, what's a high mileage Grom? So I've seen brand new Groms with 300 miles on it with burnt out clutches. Mileage is only an indicator, but it can be deceiving. Someone can easily swap out a gauge. They can put one on there that says 1,000 miles even though it's got 10,000 miles on it. People are selling gauges off strip Groms all the time. Go on eBay, just type in Grom gauge. You can get one with 1,000 miles on it for $100. So don't let the miles scare you away, and don't just assume that it's a lower mileage bike that's worth more than a higher mileage one. I'd rather have a Grom with 5,000 miles owned by a retiree that waxes chain before every ride over a first-time rider with 500 miles of pure abuse. You're gonna have to look at the condition of the Grom over the mileage, but yeah, I've seen people put 10,000 miles on this the first year. If the maintenance is kept up, then the mileage plays less of a factor. I'd say anything under 3,000 miles should be pretty well together. If the tires are bald after 3,000 miles, they've been doing burnouts. I rode 4,500 plus miles across the USA in the middle of summer, and when we got back, the tires looked brand new. So yeah, don't get hung up on miles too much, just kind of trust your gut there. So the first thing I do when I get there is I build a little rapport, kick the tires, look around the bike, then I ask for the title, and I check the VIN on the title, make sure it matches the frame. And then I make sure there's no liens on the title as well. If the title and the frame don't match up, walk away from the bike. It could be stolen, and that's not something you want to deal with. So if everything appears to be in order, I ask to take it around the block. A lot of times, sellers will be hesitant to let potential buyers ride it without cash in hand. It's a liability issue. Plus, if you go down and don't buy it, the seller doesn't have much recourse to get their money back besides sue you. Yeah, good luck with that. So don't be surprised if they ask to hold the cash before letting you go on a test ride. All right, so as far as the test ride, let me go ahead and just switch over to my recent used Grom purchase test ride. When I go on a test ride, I'm going to go through the gears. It's 4 gears, 1 down, neutral in the middle, and then 3 up. Between first and second, sometimes grabs a false neutral. So if that happens to you, don't get scared. It's a common issue on these bikes. Just boot it into second and continue riding.
I'm going to be real quick. I mean, I already know I'm going to buy this. You can hear how low the idle is? Listen to that.
The first thing I'm checking is the clutch. When I'm rolling about 5 miles an hour, I'm going to pop that clutch, let it out quickly, see if it grabs. The front wheel might come up a little bit, but it should be springy with no slipping.
Oh yeah, she's good. Let's just make sure it doesn't slip. So that's popping the gear is what I want to do just to make sure it doesn't slip.
A clutch replacement is about $100 in parts, so it's not a deal breaker for me. But if you don't want the headache, take that in consideration. But I do have videos on how to replace your clutch on this channel. Again, subscribe.
Yeah, it goes through the gears good. Yeah, it comes up perfect. Finds neutral easy, that's good. 923 miles on it. Yeah, brand new. This is a brand new Grom. So I don't know if you can hear it. Well, it's all the noise is coming out of the exhaust. The motor's very quiet. There's no noise coming out of the motor at all. It's all coming out of exhaust, which that's what you want to hear. Stock exhaust, listen how loud this is. God, that sounds good. So the frame, I checked the VIN number, frame's good there. The VIN matches up. There's a sticker down here. I can see it, still got the cover on it. Looking at one number, okay, it's good there. So I look at the frame damage, these little stops right here, make sure none of that's damaged. This is a mint one. This exhaust is 500 bucks. No scratches on it, that's good. A little dusty, but no scratches on it, we're good there. It's got the rear sets, pegs are still intact. This, your brake, if it's been down a lot, it might be bent, so that's a perfect angle, so you know that one's good, it's never been down. Chain needs to be adjusted a little bit. It's got the tidy tail on it. The Honda Minis, not my favorite, but they're okay. A little mark on the stator cover, probably just rubbed up against something, or his boot or something like that. Just rubbed the paint off, that's fine. So it's good. So I want to pay $2,500 for this. I talked him down from 28. The exhaust is a $500 exhaust. I can get $300 for that all day. The Power Commander, I think it's like 200 bucks, maybe more. I'm gonna sell it for like 100. I'm gonna do some more research on it, but that's $400 right there. The bars, if I take those off, another like 50, 40, 50. Let's just say it's $2,100 if I sell those two things for 400 bucks. So $2,100 for a 2017 completely stock, for the most part, Honda Grom. Yeah, it's worth it. Let's go back and make a deal. No rust anywhere I can see. Looks good.
So how do I know if the bike's been stunted? So the problem with stunted Grom, the way they designed this Grom motor, it has engine oil starvation, meaning when you do a wheelie, all the engine oil goes to the back of the motor. The top, which is the head and the piston and the cylinder, gets no oil, and that'll create an issue. I have plenty of videos on my channel showing that. So you're gonna have to do some research. First, ask the seller, did you stun it? If they're riding mile-long wheelies, ask if they did the oil pickup mod. It's a common mod. It's about $70. It takes the OEM oil pump, adds a straw to it. That way it picks up from the back of the motor, so when you're doing a wheelie, not starving your motor of oil. Without it, you're going to be doing some damage to your motor. You can also check the oil overflow catch thing on the air box. When you overfill it or you do long wheelies, oil will be pushed into the air box and drained out the little sight glass. If it's filled with oil, it's probably been stunted. But broken plastic, scrapes on the bar ends, the pegs, those are all indicators that it probably has been down a couple times and stunted. Again, if you're planning on stunting out this Grom, it's good to know what you're paying for and the condition. I personally recommend buying, again, as close to stock as possible and not stunted out, and then you got a blank canvas and you can put your own stunt parts on it, unless it has really quality stunt parts on it. And I have a link down below if you want to see what parts I have on my Grom. Those are what I recommend. So frame damage is another big indicator. So if you run into a curb going 3 miles an hour, your frame's going to get bent like this. This is obviously to the extreme. However, it's worth checking. Get down on your knees. You'll be able to take a flashlight in there and kind of get a good idea. With that being said, doesn't mean you have to walk away from it. A new frame is less than 200 bucks, brand new, but you still have to have it stamped and you have to swap out the frame. So it's not a huge undertaking if you know your way around a toolbox, but I personally wouldn't spend over $1,500 for a Grom with frame damage and a clean title. At the end of the day, don't get hung up too much on the mechanics of the Grom. Look it over, take it for a test ride, trust your gut based on the information I told you above. If you find something out, it's not the end of the world. Making sure it has a clean title and not a bent frame is probably the biggest kickers I look for. The Grom community is very unique and strong, so chances are there's someone local that owns a Grom and wouldn't mind helping you out if you need to do some mechanical work on it. Or if you're mechanically inclined and you have some tools, I have plenty of videos on this channel that give you step-by-step tutorials on how to work on your Grom. It's crazy easy to work on these bikes. Hopefully you feel a little bit more confident in shopping for your used Grom. If I missed anything, please leave a comment down below. I'll reply directly to you. If I miss it and you're a Grom rider, look through those comments. Help answer some of those questions or add your insight to the comments section. Maybe you have a different experience than I do. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you like this video if you found it to be helpful. I also have a link to all my Grom mods down below, so if you want to start modding your Groms, click that link down below and it'll take you to all my mods. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next one.